For today's Inside Look on France 24, and for that we'll go to the African Union Summit in Ethiopia. The summit does look to be taken over by the growing conflicts in both Central African Republic and South Sudan. Joining me now for more on all of this is our correspondent Duncan Woodside in Addis-Ababa. Duncan, hello. Thank you for taking some time to talk to us on today's Inside Look. Let's start with the Central African Republic. Obviously, the crisis there is high on the agenda. What's the diplomatic response from the AU to that crisis?
Well, that's right. Yes, Central African Republic very much dominating the agenda at the African Union at the moment. There was a meeting yesterday of the AU's Peace and Security Council, which was addressed by Chad's president, Idris Deby. And after that address, he spoke to us, emphasizing the fact that the situation in the Central African Republic continues to spiral out of control. Now, Chad is one of many troop contributing countries to the African-led peacekeeping mission in the Central African Republic, and he's requesting that the international community do more to assist that effort. That's ahead of a donor meeting which is due to take place here in Addis-Ababa on Saturday.
Duncan, tell us a bit more about that donor meeting. What does it hope to achieve?
Well, the donor meeting is being convened here on Saturday essentially to draw support, draw funding from multiple sources, not just the African nations themselves, but more importantly from the European Union, the United States and other major world powers. That's in a context, of course, where there are limited financial resources available from African nations. We saw last year a similar exercise for Mali, for example, a similar initiative, a similar conference here at Addis-Ababa. And that conference resulted in big pledges from Western nations and only small amounts on the table from African nations. And it's likely to be similar this time around as well with Central African Republic. So,
Duncan, it does seem that there is indeed a limit to what exactly Africa itself can do to help African problems, especially in respect to the Central African Republic.
That's certainly the case, yes. Obviously, there are these massive funding constraints, but also it's a case of there being European boots on the ground as well in the Central African Republic in particular. There is the African-led force there, around 5,000 troops at the moment, but there are also 1,600 French troops there. And earlier this week, the UN Security Council approved the deployment of a 600-strong European Union force. So obviously, very much a case of European powers being embroiled in the conflict in Africa. That was the case, of course, in Mali as well, with French intervention there. And this has led France to say that there are limits to which it can be expected to operate as a policeman of African affairs.
Duncan, obviously Central African Republic isn't the only major conflict going on now on the continent in Africa. Also, South Sudan is a major worry. Is there anything new to report on that front from that African Union summit?
Of course, yes, South Sudan, the conflict there now is around 6 to 7, 8 weeks old. It's been going on since early to mid-December, and it's been a severe conflict already. Tens of thousands of people displaced. The International Crisis Group, for example, estimates that 10,000 people have been killed, which is significantly higher than the UN estimate. But yes, obviously this is a massive issue, the situation in South Sudan, and it's causing a number of complications here in terms of mediation efforts. There was a ceasefire signed last week by the government and the rebel forces here in Addis-Ababa, but since then the negotiations, or the attempt to broker proper negotiations, that's moved to Nairobi, the capital of Kenya. And there was actually a breakthrough yesterday, in as much as the South Sudanese government released 4 political prisoners to Kenya to partake in negotiations for the rebel side. So there's a glimmer of hope there. But obviously the situation is dire in South Sudan at present.
Duncan, obviously these conflicts in South Sudan and Central African Republic have really gone to the forefront there at the AU. But what else is on the agenda at this summit? What are the other pressing concerns?
Well, the other key theme is the situation with regard to the spreading influence, the amorphous influence, really, of Al-Qaeda. We saw, or Al-Qaeda affiliates. We saw the Westgate bombings in Kenya, of course, the Westgate siege in Kenya in September last year. That brought Al-Shabaab to the forefront of people's minds in terms of the ongoing fight against Al-Qaeda affiliates. Now, there is representation from the US here. The US Undersecretary of State is here to represent US interests and to talk to the various powers who have gathered here. That's ahead of a meeting which will take place later this year in Washington between African powers and the US government. This comes in a context, of course, where African troops have been absolutely crucial to the ongoing fight against Al-Shabaab in Somalia, Al-Shabaab having been pushed out of most major urban centres in Somalia over the last couple of years. So the Americans and also European powers are very keen to engage and also continue to put money on the table to combat these Al-Qaeda affiliates.
All right, Duncan, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. That was our Duncan Woodside there, giving us an inside look at that African Union summit that's on now in Addis-Ababa, Ethiopia. All right, next for you on France 24, rock, Bible, and staunchly liberal magazine Rolling Stone has a new cover boy, the Vatican's own Pope Francis. More on that after the break.